Ruthless and cold, the leader of the city's deadliest syndicate broke bones without a second thought. Yet stepping into his own diner and hearing the heavy-set waitress weeping in the back kitchen made the monster pause. What he discovered that rainy night changed his dark world forever. The rain in South Boston fell in sheets, washing the grime from the sidewalks, but doing nothing to cleanse the sins of the men who ruled its underground. Enzo Moretti was a man intimately acquainted with those sins. As the head of the Moretti syndicate, his name was a whispered curse in the back rooms of the city's most corrupt establishments. Yet, at 2 a.m. on a miserable Tuesday, Enzo wasn't sitting in a velvet-lined casino or a high-rise boardroom. He was pushing through the glass doors of the Copper Kettle, a run-down 24-hour diner he owned on the edge of the district. The diner was a front, a legitimate cash business used to wash the less savory income of the Moretti family. Enzo rarely visited, but tonight the insomnia that plagued him demanded a greasy cup of coffee and the anonymity of a cracked vinyl booth. Behind the counter, the late-night shift was a grueling marathon of burnt toast and bitter exhaustion. Harper Hayes wiped down the laminate surface for the 4th time that hour, her breathing heavy. Harper was a big woman, explicitly and unapologetically fat, though society constantly demanded she apologize for it. Her cotton uniform strained uncomfortably across her broad hips and full chest, the fabric digging into her skin after 9 hours on her feet. Her ankles were swollen, throbbing with a dull, persistent ache that traveled all the way up her lower back. She wasn't just tired, she was carrying the weight of the world, and it was crushing her. Harper was 26, drowning in medical debt. Her mother was currently lying in a sterile room at Massachusetts General Hospital under the care of Dr. Harrison Miller, fighting a losing battle against aggressive lymphoma. Every tip Harper made, every extra shift she begged for from her cruel manager, Paulie, went straight to the pharmacy bills. The bell above the door chimed. Harper looked up, pasting on a customer service smile that didn't reach her red-rimmed eyes. Enzo stepped inside, shaking the rain from his expensive wool trench coat. He was a striking man, tall, sharply angled, with eyes the color of a stormy sea, and a jawline that looked like it had been carved from marble. He exuded an aura of absolute, terrifying control. The 2 truck drivers sitting at the far end of the counter immediately lowered their voices, instinctively recognizing a predator in the room. "Just coffee." "Black," Enzo said, sliding into a corner booth. His voice was a low, gravelly baritone that sent an unexpected shiver down Harper's spine. "Coming right up, sir," Harper murmured, her cheeks flushing slightly as she felt his intense gaze sweep over her. She was used to being looked at with either disgust or complete invisibility. Enzo's look was neither. It was calculating, assessing. She hurriedly poured the coffee, her plump, trembling hands accidentally spilling a few drops onto the saucer. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, quickly grabbing a rag to wipe it up. "Leave it," Enzo said softly, his eyes flicking to her name tag. "Harper." "It's fine." She nodded frantically and retreated to the safety of the kitchen. The moment the swinging doors closed behind her, the facade crumbled. The exhaustion, the fear of her mother's impending eviction from the specialty ward, and the sheer physical pain of her existence collided. Harper leaned heavily against the stainless steel prep table and covered her face with her hands. The tears came then, silent at first, then racking, heavy sobs that shook her entire frame. She slid down the side of the counter, her knees pulling up to her chest as she wept into the empty, grease-scented kitchen. Out in the dining room, Enzo took a sip of the bitter coffee. The diner was dead quiet, save for the hum of the neon sign outside and the steady drumming of the rain. Then his sharp ears picked up a sound. It was a pathetic, broken sound. Someone was crying. Enzo frowned. He was not a man given to empathy. In his line of work, crying usually meant someone was bleeding, begging for their life. Or both. He ignored those tears. But this was different. This was a raw, deeply human sound of utter despair coming from the back room of his own establishment. He slid out of the booth, his footsteps silent on the checkered linoleum floor. He bypassed the employees only sign and pushed one of the swinging doors open just an inch. Through the crack, he saw her, the heavy-set waitress, Harper. She was on the floor, her face buried in her arms, her chest heaving. It wasn't the crying of someone who had a bad day. It was the weeping of someone whose spirit had been snapped in half. Enzo pushed the door fully open. The hinges squeaked. Harper's head snapped up. Her face was flushed and streaked with tears, her eyes wide with terror as she saw the intimidating, sharply dressed man standing in her kitchen. She scrambled to get up, her wet shoes slipping on the greasy tile. She fell back hard against the metal cabinets, wincing in pain. "Please," she choked out, terrified she was going to be fired for abandoning her post. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll be right out." "Stay on the floor," Enzo commanded. His voice wasn't harsh, but it brokered no argument. He walked over, towering over her. He didn't offer a hand, but he squatted down so he was closer to her eye level. "Why are you crying, Harper?" I just..." Harper stammered, wiping her nose with the back of her wrist, feeling intensely vulnerable and humiliated by her size and her lack of grace in front of this wealthy, dangerous-looking stranger. "It's nothing. Just tired." "People don't cry like that because they're tired," Enzo said, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "Try again." Harper swallowed hard, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. There was something about this man, the expensive cut of his clothes, the calm, predatory stillness of his posture, that told her lying would be a very bad idea. But how could she explain the nightmare her life had become to a complete stranger? "My manager," she whispered, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Poorly. He took my envelopes." Enzo's eyes narrowed infinitesimally. Poorly. Paulie Gatto, the loud-mouthed, greasy sycophant Enzo had placed here to run the diner's day-to-day operations. "What envelopes?" Harper pulled her knees tighter to her chest, her uniform stretching uncomfortably. "I've been working double shifts for 6 months, stashing my tips and extra pay in envelopes in my locker. It was for my mother. She's at Mass General. She needs a marrow transplant, and the insurance company Fidelity Shield denied the claim. I had $6,000 saved. It was the deposit for her room." She took a ragged breath, the tears welling up again. "I went to my locker tonight. The lock was busted. The money is gone. And Paulie laughed at me. He told me a fat pig like me probably ate the money, and if I went to the cops, he'd tell them I've been stealing from the register. He said he has video footage he can doctor." A dangerous, icy silence descended on the kitchen. Enzo stood up slowly, smoothing the front of his coat. Harper shrank back, mistaking his silence for disgust. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting to be told she was pathetic, waiting to be kicked out into the rain. Instead, Enzo pulled a sleek, encrypted smartphone from his pocket. He dialed a number and held it to his ear. "Rocco," Enzo said quietly, "get down to the kettle. Bring Dante, and find Paulie. I don't care if he's sleeping. Drag him here by his hair." He hung up. Harper stared up at him, her jaw dropping. Who are you?" "I'm the owner of this establishment," Enzo said, looking down at her, "and Paulie has a very bad habit of taking things that don't belong to him." 15 minutes later, the back door of the kitchen flew open, letting in a gust of cold, rainy wind. 2 massive men in dark leather jackets dragged a struggling, half-dressed Paulie Gatto into the room. They threw him onto the floor. Paulie groaned, looking up. When he saw Enzo standing by the prep tables, all the color drained from his face. "Boss! Enzo, I swear to God, I didn't know you were coming. What's this about?" Enzo didn't look at Paulie. He looked at Harper, who was now sitting on a stool in the corner, clutching a dish towel like a lifeline, trembling from head to toe. She had just realized that the handsome stranger in the booth was Enzo Moretti, the mob boss. "Paulie," Enzo said, his voice terrifyingly soft. "Harper here tells me you've been supplementing your income, taking money out of her locker." Paulie sneered, shooting a venomous look at the terrified, heavy-set waitress. "Her? Boss, come on. Look at her. She's a delusional, fat cow. She's been skimming the register for weeks to buy junk food. I was just holding onto the cash as collateral until I could report her to you." The sound of Enzo's fist colliding with Paulie's jaw was like a gunshot in the cramped kitchen. Harper flinched, stifling a scream. Paulie hit the tiles, spitting blood and a loose tooth. "Rocco," Enzo said calmly, flexing his knuckles. "Check the manager's office. Look under the floorboards, near the safe. Pull the secondary ledger." Paulie began to thrash in panic. "No! Boss, wait!" A few moments later, Rocco returned, handing Enzo a black leather notebook and a thick stack of cash bound in rubber bands. Some of the cash was in Harper's recognizable, pink-tinted envelopes. But it was the ledger that caught Enzo's eye. Enzo flipped through the pages. The silence in the room stretched taut, ready to snap. When Enzo finally spoke, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You aren't just stealing from waitresses, Paulie," Enzo murmured, reading the neat columns of numbers. "You're washing money. And not mine. These are transactions with the Volkov syndicate. The Russians." Harper gasped. Even she knew the Volkovs were the Moretti family's most brutal rivals. Enzo dropped the ledger onto the counter and looked at Paulie with dead eyes. "You used my diner, my front, to wash Volkov drug money. And when you were short on your own debts, you stole from a woman trying to keep her dying mother alive." "Enzo, please!" Paulie begged, sobbing now, crawling backward on the greasy floor. "They were gonna kill me! I had debts! I was gonna put it back, I swear!" Enzo nodded to Rocco and Dante. "Take him to the warehouse by the docks. I'll deal with him in an hour." "No, no, please!" Paulie screamed as the 2 giants dragged him out the back door, his cries quickly swallowed by the roaring rain outside. The kitchen was dead silent once more. Enzo turned his attention back to Harper. She was frozen on the stool, her hands clamped over her mouth, terrified that she had just witnessed a man being taken to his death. She knew too much. She was a liability. Enzo walked over to her. He picked up the stack of pink envelopes from the counter and held them out. 6,000, you said? Enzo asked. Harper could only manage a jerky nod, her eyes wide with fear. "Count it," he ordered softly. With trembling, clumsy fingers, Harper took the envelopes. She thumbed through the bills. It was all there. Every single crumpled $20 and $10 bill she had broken her back to earn. It's all here," she whispered, a fresh wave of tears springing to her eyes, this time from sheer relief. Enzo reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a sleek silver money clip. He peeled off several crisp $100 bills, easily another $4,000, and placed them on top of her envelopes. "For the hospital deposit," Enzo said, "and for the distress my employee caused you." Harper stared at the money, then up at the terrifying, beautiful man who had just dismantled her tormentor. I can't take this. You don't owe me anything. She trailed off, afraid to say his name, afraid to acknowledge what he was. "I am a businessman, Harper," Enzo said, his gaze dropping momentarily to the harsh red indentations the tight uniform left on her neck, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his eyes. "And I protect what is mine. This diner is mine, which means the people who work hard in it are under my protection. Go to the hospital. Be with your mother." Harper clutched the money to her chest. In a world that had constantly told her she took up too much space, that she was unworthy of respect or kindness, the most dangerous man in the city had just seen her, truly seen her. As Enzo turned to leave, walking back out into the rainy night to commit whatever dark deeds awaited him at the docks, Harper knew one thing for certain. The Mafia Boss had just bought her loyalty, and in doing so, he had unknowingly tethered their two vastly different worlds together. The story of the ruthless king and the broken waitress had just begun. Massachusetts General Hospital was a sprawling labyrinth of blindingly bright corridors and the ever-present, suffocating scent of bleach. For Harper, walking through the sliding glass doors of the oncology wing usually felt like marching toward an inevitable execution. But today was profoundly different. Today she carried the heavy, life-saving weight of $10,000 in her worn leather purse. She found Dr. Harrison Miller standing near the nurse's station, reviewing a chart. He was an older man, highly respected, but visibly exhausted by the endless parade of tragedies in his ward. When Harper approached, clutching her bag to her chest, he offered a sympathetic, weary smile. He expected her to ask for another extension, another payment plan, that the hospital's billing department would mercilessly reject. "Harper," Dr. Miller said gently, "I know you've been trying, but Fidelity Shield called again this morning. If we don't have the room deposit by noon, I have to transfer your mother to palliative care." Without a word, Harper unzipped her purse. She pulled out the stack of pink envelopes and the crisp, banded hundreds Enzo Moretti had given her. She placed the money on the counter. "It's all there. $10,000. Count it. Please, just get her the marrow transplant." Dr. Miller stared at the cash in absolute shock. He looked from the money to Harper's tear-stained but fiercely determined face. "Harper, this is a massive amount of cash. Are you sure you are in a safe position? We don't want you getting into any trouble." "It's clean," Harper lied, though the truth was she had no idea where Enzo's money came from. She didn't care. "Just save my mother." For the next 3 days, Harper existed in a state of surreal, floating relief. Her mother was moved to the specialized ward, the transplant was scheduled, and for the first time in years, Harper could breathe. But she hadn't returned to the copper kettle. The memory of Paulie's blood on the linoleum and the terrifyingly calm demeanor of Enzo Moretti haunted her dreams. She was a fat, invisible woman who had suddenly become painfully visible to the most dangerous man in the city. However, the criminal underworld does not allow loose ends to fade into obscurity. Paulie Gatto's sudden disappearance did not go unnoticed by the Volkov syndicate. Alexei Volkov, a ruthless enforcer known for his complete lack of mercy, had been relying on Paulie to launder a massive shipment of illegal arms profits through the diner. When Paulie vanished, Along with the ledger and the latest cash drop, Alexei began tracing the rat's final footsteps. His investigation inevitably led straight to the late-night shift at the Copper Kettle. On a damp Thursday evening, Harper was finally forced to leave the safety of the hospital to collect some clothes from her cramped basement apartment on the south side of the city. The neighborhood was quiet, the streetlights flickering overhead as she fumbled with her keys. She never saw the black SUV pull up to the curb. Before she could unlock her door, a massive, heavily tattooed hand clamped over her mouth. Harper screamed, but the sound was muffled against the rough leather of a driving glove. She fought fiercely, her heavy frame giving her enough leverage to throw an elbow backward, connecting solidly with her attacker's ribs. A sharp curse in Russian echoed in the damp alleyway. Another man stepped out of the shadows, grabbing her arms and pinning them behind her back. "Stop fighting, you fat pig!" Alexei hissed, his heavily accented voice dripping with venom. He stepped into the dim light, revealing a scarred face and cold, dead eyes. "You work the night shift at the Kettle. You were there the night Paulie disappeared. We know Moretti was there too." Harper's heart hammered a frantic, terrified rhythm against her ribs. "I don't know anything," she sobbed, struggling against the iron grip of the men holding her. "I'm just a waitress. Please let me go." Alexei pulled a sleek, silver combat knife from his jacket, the blade glinting menacingly in the streetlights. "Paulie owed us money. Moretti took the ledger. We need to know what Moretti knows, and we need our cash. You are going to tell us everything you saw, or I will carve you into pieces." He pressed the flat of the blade against her cheek, the cold metal sending a shock wave of pure terror through her system. Harper closed her eyes, praying for a miracle. She thought of her mother, finally safe in the hospital, and wept at the thought of leaving her alone. Then the agonizing sound of screeching tires shattered the silence of the alley. Two sleek black sedans roared down the narrow street, blocking both ends of the alleyway. The doors flew open in perfect synchronization. "Drop the knife, Volkov," a terrifyingly calm, gravelly voice commanded from the darkness. Harper opened her eyes. Standing 15 feet away, illuminated by the harsh glare of the headlights, was Enzo Moretti. He wasn't wearing a tailored trench coat tonight. He was in a simple black shirt, a suppressed pistol held loosely, casually, in his right hand. Flanking him were Rocco and Dante, armed with assault rifles. Alexei sneered, though a flicker of genuine fear crossed his eyes. "Moretti, you bring a war over a waitress?" "She is not just a waitress," Enzo said, his voice dropping an octave, resonating with lethal promise. "She is under my protection, and you just touched what belongs to me." The violence that followed was fast, brutal, and utterly silent, save for the sickening crunch of bone and the muted thwip of Enzo's suppressed weapon. Harper squeezed her eyes shut, clapping her hands over her ears, her entire body shaking as the Russian thugs were neutralized with terrifying efficiency. When silence finally descended, Harper felt a warm, strong hand gently touch her shoulder. She flinched violently, expecting a blow. "Look at me," Enzo commanded softly. She opened her tear-filled eyes. Enzo was kneeling in front of her, on the damp pavement, his stormy eyes scanning her face, his gaze lingering on the faint red mark the flat of Alexei's blade had left on her cheek. The absolute fury radiating from him was palpable, yet his touch was remarkably tender. "Did they hurt you?" he asked, his thumb gently brushing away a stray tear from her cheek. No, Harper stammered, her chest heaving. How did you know they were here?" I've had Rocco watching you since the night at the diner, Enzo admitted, standing up and offering her his hand. I knew the Volkovs would start looking for Paulie's loose ends. I couldn't leave you exposed. Harper stared at his outstretched hand. She was a woman society had always deemed unworthy of rescue. Her size, her poverty, her status, they were all reasons people looked away. Yet here was the king of the city's underworld, pulling her from the wreckage. She took his hand. His grip was firm, hauling her to her feet with ease. You can't go back to this apartment, Enzo said, glancing at the run-down building with clear distaste. And you can't go back to the diner. You're coming with me. Before she could protest, Enzo led her to the lead sedan and opened the passenger door. An hour later, they arrived at Enzo's private estate, a sprawling, heavily fortified mansion nestled in the secluded hills outside the city limits. The interior was a masterpiece of dark wood, rich leather, and silent professional security guards. Harper felt entirely out of place, her cheap clothes and heavy figure a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. She stood awkwardly in the center of the massive living room, wrapping her arms around her stomach. Enzo poured 2 glasses of amber liquid at a crystal decanter station and walked over, handing her one. Drink, he instructed. It will calm your nerves. Harper took a sip, the expensive bourbon burning a fiery, comforting trail down her throat. Mr. Moretti. Enzo, he corrected, leaning against the edge of a mahogany desk, watching her with that same intense, calculating gaze from the diner. Enzo, she tried, the name feeling foreign and dangerous on her tongue. I don't understand. You gave me the money. You saved my life, tonight. Why? I'm nobody. I'm just... me. She gestured vaguely to her large body, a lifetime of insecurity bubbling to the surface. Why are you doing this? Enzo set his glass down. He closed the distance between them, with slow, deliberate steps, until he was standing just inches away. Harper had to tilt her head back to look into his eyes. You think your size makes you invisible, Harper, Enzo said, his voice a low rumble. You think it makes you weak? But the night I saw you in that kitchen completely broken, you still got up. You took my money not for yourself but to save your mother. You took a hit from a Russian enforcer tonight and fought back. He reached out, his knuckles grazing the soft curve of her jawline. Harper's breath hitched. In my world, loyalty and strength are the only currencies that matter, Enzo continued, his gaze dropping to her full lips. I am surrounded by people who are hollow inside, starving for power. You are overflowing with heart, Harper. You are soft, and you are fiercely loyal. I find that intoxicating. Harper's heart pounded, a flush creeping up her neck. Nobody had ever spoken to her like this. Nobody had ever looked at her curves, her softness, and seen strength instead of gluttony. To ensure your absolute safety, there are some protocols we must establish immediately, Enzo stated, his tone shifting back to the authoritative boss, though his hand remained gently on her waist. Enzo's security protocols. Total relocation. You will reside in the east wing of this estate. Your mother will be transferred to my private medical facility upon her recovery. Constant detail. Dante will act as your personal shadow. Where you go, he goes. Financial severance. Your debts are cleared. The medical bills are paid in full. You will never wash another dish. Harper looked at the list of demands forming in her mind, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of his control. You're taking over my entire life. I am protecting what is mine, Enzo repeated, the possessiveness in his voice sending a hot shiver down her spine. The Volkovs will not stop. A war has started tonight, Harper, and I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let them touch a single hair on your head." He leaned in then, and Harper didn't pull away. The kiss was not soft. It was a branding, a fierce, desperate claiming that ignited a fire deep within her soul. He held her tightly, pulling her generous curves flush against his hard, heavily muscled frame, making her feel cherished, protected, and incredibly desired. In the span of a week, Harper Hayes had gone from a weeping, drowning waitress to the most protected woman in Boston. She had uncovered a money laundering ring, sparked a mafia war, and somehow, against all odds, captured the cold, ruthless heart of Enzo Moretti. The battles ahead with the Volkov syndicate would be bloody, but as Harper stood in the arms of the syndicate king, she knew one thing for absolute certain. She was never going to be invisible again. Did Enzo and Harper's unexpected romance capture your heart? This thrilling tale of a mafia boss and a brave waitress proves that true love sees beyond society's shallow standards. If you want more gripping stories filled with dangerous twists, passionate romance, and real-life drama, don't forget to hit that like button. Share this video with your friends who love mafia romances, and subscribe to our channel for weekly updates. Drop a comment below with your favorite moment from their story.